Hello, and welcome to I Hate Talking, a podcast about talking, including etymology, frustrating topics, current events, and other random subjects. I'm Adam.
And I'm Steph. We are married, and we invite you into these discussions with us as we talk about the good and the bad of talking.
We hope you enjoy today's episode. Welcome to episode 23 of I Hate Talking.
Hi, everyone.
So our word or phrase of this episode is going to be somewhat similar to a word or phrase that we discussed in part 10 episodes ago in episode 13.
Whoa, that's a long time ago.
Indeed it was. And that particular word that I'm thinking of is temper or tamper, where we actually, as we discussed the etymology, found out and shared with our audience that those actually had the same root word, but later came to be used in far different ways, because obviously temper, to improve something, versus tamper, to actually cause something harm, are far different, even though they had the same root word.
Right. I remember.
So today's word is nice.
Okay.
So this is a little bit different. It's one singular word that has had a variety of meanings over the last 700 years or so.
Huh.
So I think you'd be probably already familiar with its modern usage and definition.
Right. The only thing I think of when I hear the word nice is a kind person or an enjoyable experience, or, to use in a phrase like, it's nice to meet you, or that person is so nice. It would be nice to go get ice cream. So all would be referencing something being pleasant.
And that is the very first word that is given as a synonym and definition of the word nice in its modern usage, according to the Oxford Dictionary, is pleasant. It also can mean agreeable, satisfactory, and it also can be specifically applied to a person, that a person is pleasant in their manner and agreeableness.
Right. So what are the other ones? I can't even think of another one off the top of my head.
So that is the modern usage, and that has been popular for the last 200 years or so, and has been actually gaining popularity and usage more recently into like the 1950s, and even continued usage and growth in the 2000s. So we actually see this word being used more frequently in literature and everyday speech and things of that nature. But the root word, and as we look at the etymology of this word, is that it actually comes from the Latin, and it means to not know.
Huh. Okay. Well, explain that and explain how we went from not know to pleasant.
So in the 13th century, it was used in the Latin as ni, for not, and sire, for to know. So similar to like science, that type of root word. So that came to be put together and used together in Latin as nicius, and that came to then be used in the French to mean ignorant, unaware, and not knowing. So basically, overall, nice meaning ignorant because you're not knowing something. It then came to be used within the French language as careless, clumsy, weak, poor, needy, simple, stupid, silly, and foolish. And from there, that was used throughout the 13th century, like I said, up through 1400s and so on and so forth, and then came to mean fussy or fastidious because, again, maybe they were not following a particular way of doing something because they were ignorant, so they were fussy or trying to do something a certain way. And then came to mean dainty or delicate, and then precise or careful, and then that is how it eventually evolved into agreeable and delightful in the 1700s, and then kind and thoughtful, and into our modern day use of being pleasant and agreeable in the 1900s.
Okay, so what would other cultures say even currently? Because it reminds me of when I studied abroad in Russia, we were told not to smile. try not to smile as much as we typically do. Because I feel like in my culture, I would smile as I walk past somebody as like a greeting to be pleasant. And they had a phrase and it meant smiling is idiocy. So smiling means you're dumb. And it's making me think of that. Like, I like nice people. I like pleasant people. But if they are nice and pleasant, does that actually mean that they're ignorant?
In the 13th century to at least the 16th, maybe 17th century, yes, that is what that word meant. And then over time has evolved into what we use it as today. But maybe when you are using that word in the future, maybe you'll think that something's nice and have this callback definition actually in mind. So it could be your version of in the South, bless your heart, when you are saying that it's nice to meet you or somebody did a nice job.
Interesting. I will think of this now because I feel like a while back we even took like a personality thing. And one of them was like, what do you want people to call you? And I think I'm pretty sure I wrote nice. Like, because you're just supposed to do like one or two words to describe who you want people to think of you as. And I instantly think, I want people to think I'm a nice person. I want them to think I'm pleasant to be around. I can see how that's a backhanded compliment now.
So as we close out this section of our episode today, there's a couple different authors that actually comment on its evolution of usage. So there was an author named Fowler that said in 1926 that the word nice was too great a favorite with the ladies, who have charmed out of it all its individuality and converted it into a mere diffuser of vague and mild agreeableness. And then there's actually another author, you're probably familiar with this one, Jane Austen, in Northanger Abbey, poked fun at this word when she wrote, "I am sure," cried Catherine, "I did not mean to say anything wrong, but it is a nice book, and why should I not call it so?" "Very true," said Henry, "and this is a very nice day, and we are taking a very nice walk, and you are two very nice young ladies. Oh, it is a very nice word indeed. It does for everything."
Okay.
And you even use that in your example that it might be nice to meet someone, or it might be nice to go out for ice cream, or it might be good to use it in how you describe an experience as a nice thing to do. So even in the very start of our episode, we were using it in a variety of very imprecise usages.
Right. Yeah.
So on to our topic at hand for this episode. I think we had a very nice time this summer. Would you care to tell our audience what we did this summer,
Nice.
the summer of 2024?
I like how you did that. Nice. So, yeah, we challenged ourselves to, in the beginning of summer, we spoke to each other, we spoke to our kids about what our goals were for the summer. And we actually challenged ourselves to do what we called a summer of camping. We had 13 weeks this summer, and we wanted to camp 13 nights at least, one night a week at least. We could camp multiple nights if we had the opportunity, but we had to, within a 7-day period, camp somewhere. And when I say camp, I mean tent camping. We set up a tent. We did leave it open to be like, if we wanted open air, if we had the opportunity, because sometimes you like to do hammock camping. But I think every time we did a tent, we did not do any open air.
That's true. Yeah, we did have a few nights out of the summer where we did not have our rain cover on. So it was almost open air, right? Because we do have that tent style that has basically just the mesh for keeping the bugs out, almost nearly on the entire top half. So that was close to open air, but yes, everything tent camping. And while not camping, quote unquote, in a RV or other cabin type style thing, it was still car camping. We had all our supplies. We were right nearby, running water and facilities of that nature. So,
well, sometimes we didn't have running water. Most of the time we did, but we always were within a mile of our car.
That is true. There was a few times that we did not have running water. That's true. So that was a little bit more rustic.
But it wasn't like we were backpacking. We could get to our car fairly easily every time.
This summer, anyway. Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, everyone, when we first told them what we were doing this summer, thought it was crazy. And then I don't think most people believed we would do it, but we do as a family enjoy camping. We knew going into it that there'd be times that we would be miserable. Like, okay, we won't want to do this. The weather won't be great, anything like that. But we are going to do it because this will be a summer we can look back on and say we camped versus, I don't know what we did last summer. A few things pop up in my mind, but I wanted like an overarching theme this year that the 6 of us as a family spent time outside, just ourselves.
And we did accomplish our goal. So we were able to tent camp every single week, at least one night a week, for all the weeks over summer. I think we did have some plans to camp multiple nights in a row. And for whatever reason, those either fell through or had to be adjusted because of weather. So I think each week we actually only camped one night. Is that correct?
In one location. We had some weeks that we camped one place. One time we camped and then went to a different state. And that next night, camped somewhere else. But we never ended up staying in the same location for 2 nights in a row.
And some of those locations were our backyard, which was allowed in our original challenge. That would still count.
Yes, we did say that we could camp. I think by the end, our kids actually, the very last week, that's what we did. We gave them options of where they'd want to go. And they chose just to set out a projector and watch a movie in our backyard and camp. And that was a really nice, quiet way to end it. And so I'm glad we did that. And the movie night outside was really fun.
Yep. And actually, when we were on our own property, I think the one time we camped in the front yard and then the side yard and then the backyard. Yes. So even when we were at home, they were actually all in different locations.
They were all different. Again, I was saying earlier that people kind of didn't believe us. They did not think we were going to accomplish our goal. And it got off to a really rocky start. Do you want to tell them what happened the first weekend?
Yeah, so I think the first weekend, that would have been Memorial Day, if I'm recalling this correctly. And we had booked a stay at Hip Camp, or through Hip Camp, rather, which we'll put the link in the description on that. It's basically Airbnb for campsites. So there are individual property owners that have a large tract of land or some sort of property where they can have their residence and then have some camp area adjacent to it. So we booked one of those and had everything squared away with the host. This was going to be one of the more rustic adventures that we were planning on from the very start. No facilities, no running water. So we were preparing all our supplies to be able to do that. There was also the question of whether our vehicle would even be able to get to the campsite because you had to cross a small stream. And in our particular vehicle, that may have been difficult. But unfortunately, we never even got to find out because that was one of the weekends that we had some pretty severe weather come through. And luckily, through the HipCamp app, we were able to cancel and get a full refund, and that was fine by our host because they allowed that and actually had some messages after the fact that they would have done the same thing. So we did not ever actually make it to that particular destination.
We were torn. We were watching the weather, and we did not want to cancel our first weekend. But the weather was looking bad. We decided to cancel. And just a few miles away from where we were staying, they had hail the size of a quarter and maybe a few that were like $50. The photos I saw were insane. So it is a very good thing that we weren't there because our tent, that would have been dangerous, especially if we had to park the car and walk to our site. We did not have any shelter that would have kept us safe from that large of a hail. And then the next day, weather was great, and we just camped in our yard.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think we even had some pretty bad weather that evening at our own home,
Mm-hmm.
right? Since we were not
We lost
too
power.
far down the road from where we were planning on staying. And yeah, lost power. I think had some large branches down. Obviously, lightning as a particular danger that one would want to avoid. So I think we definitely made the right call on that. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, as you said, the weather was beautiful the next day, and we camped in our yard the following evening.
Right. Everyone, though, definitely, even mostly your friends, I think we're messaging you, right? Like, well, that was a nice run. Kind of like a ha ha. We knew this wouldn't work. But we camped that next night in our yard and we were determined to make it work.
And I think that may have been our only weather cancellation,
Mm-hmm.
if I recall correctly. So somehow, the rest of the weeks, we were able to avoid the weather. And based on our itinerary that we had for the remainder of our summer, we were good from the weather perspective.
Yeah, we really lucked out. There were a few times that could be possible weather, and everywhere that there may be weather, we made sure that we had safe places that we could go to, like shelters, right next door. We were prepared. I don't even know if we got much rain, period, the whole summer while we were camping.
So I do remember two specific nights, again, different weeks that we had rain, but yeah, it wasn't really even that torrential. The one we definitely had to dry everything off and get it put away properly, but the other time was relatively dry even in the morning and didn't take that much extra time to break camp
Mhm.
given the weather. So yeah, not even really any rain to speak of, except for a couple instances, and not even that severe in those instances.
Yeah. So, what, in your opinion, were the biggest pluses or negatives to our summer of camping?
Well, I think one of my biggest positives, which may actually be a negative for some of the other campers, was just the reduced screen time. So we were able to spend some time around the fire. We did some storytelling. Now, we did use some devices still connected to the internet to get some AI prompts for maybe some ideas for storytelling that we then built off of and sort of had everybody go around and add their portion to the story. But nonetheless, right, some additional time without looking at a screen and being able to enjoy nature to that end and spend time together.
Yeah, I think our kids, when you said other campers don't appreciate it, I wasn't sure if you meant like our noise level, because we have a bunch of people in our campsite, but you meant our children. They were sad that they didn't get TV. But they rallied. They're used to it. They were okay. I think their biggest takeaway would be the amount of marshmallows they ate this summer was astronomical.
Indeed, that's true. We did a lot of s'mores, a lot of roasting of marshmallows, and then yeah, there's a number of them that we'll just eat them straight out of the bag, just as they are, without any cooking or any other ingredients added.
Yeah, just pure sugar. They ate them every week.
Yep, indeed they did.
My biggest takeaway, I think, was I mean, I liked the no screens. I liked no obligations. My biggest problem with camping in general is the amount of work I perceive it as. You have to get out your tent, the chairs, the camping stove. I mean, you don't have to, but we get out, can't all these things, and then you have to clean it all up, and that's so frustrating to have to make sure everything's cleaned and packed properly for the next time you use it.
Which was a benefit of doing this challenge on a
Mhm.
weekly basis because we didn't really ever put everything away.
Yeah.
We just kept the things out that we knew could be kept out, and obviously still maintained the tent and food stuffs and things of that nature. But yeah, everything stayed in the garage, sort of staged. So a lot of it stayed in the car all week
Mhm.
long, and then we would just go on to our next destination.
Yeah, made it so nice. It was alleviated so much work. Because even I feel like we have to wash our bedding super well and pack it well for next time. But when you're going to use it in another 5 days or so, I was much more comfortable making sure it was clean and just packed up and waiting for to be used in 5 days. And every once in a while, we'd wash everything really well. But as a whole, I didn't feel like we had to pack everything and put it away in storage.
Exactly. And we did have a lot of other foods that we ate besides marshmallows. So we did have a number of dessert things, s'mores and related s'more adjacent things for dessert. But we also tried a number of different things for dinner and breakfast on our camping night. So
Thumbs
what
up and thumbs
was,
down.
yeah, exactly. So what was the top rated meal as well as perhaps the one that was the flop?
In my opinion, or as a family as a whole?
Well, I think we'll probably have different top meals.
Okay.
I think the flop might be the same for every single camper.
Oh, no. Okay. So the flop one, I'm sure what you're thinking of, is I got this great idea that we should make DIY pizza. And I got all the ingredients. I pre-cut everything. It was a lot of work. And the dough, okay, I should have, y'all, next time, if you do this, it's a great idea. Buy pre-cooked dough. That was my error. If the dough was pre-cooked, it would have been a very pleasant experience. We laid out the raw dough and put our ingredients on it and then tried to cook it over the fire and got a burnt hot mess.
Indeed, it was. And that was the one I was thinking of. And
Was that your birthday? Was
I
that your
don't
birthday
think
week?
that was my birthday. That was a different time. That was the second time going to that location that we did my birthday at the first time.
Yeah, so I guess we'll say that too, that we camped at our house 3 different times because of events like weather related or just a really busy week. Those are why we had to camp at home. But we went to the same location twice because our kids we all loved it so much. We went once and loved it, so we all went back a second time. So the second time at that location's when I had the big flop meal.
Exactly. Yep. And to your point, right? The all the other times were one visit, and then we moved on to a different location.
Mm-hmm.
And that was purposeful, right? Because we wanted to see as many different areas as we could this summer. But yes, that was the flop. Lots of either uncooked pizzas that needed to be discarded, or ones that were extremely burnt and black. And I think we were able to salvage, some of the toppings from some of those, but it did not.
And the smell
work
was
very good.
bad. It smelled so bad.
But you're right. I think that if we had pre-cooked dough, or things that were safe to eat, if they were just warmed and not cooked thoroughly through, then that would have been a success. So you can learn from our errors on that one.
Yeah, try it and let us know if you try it or if you had tried it. I did not try to duplicate it because it is such a negative experience for my family. But maybe next year or the following years, we can try making DIY pizza with pre-cooked bread.
There you go.
So that was definitely the flop. The best thing our kids liked was just hot dogs. They love the amount of hot dogs they got to eat. I'm thinking for breakfast, we got sausage patties that were pre-cooked. We kept them in our cooler, and we heated those up, and everybody really loved those sausage in the morning.
Yep, those were definitely a hit with the kids, and myself included. So that was probably, for the entire group, probably one of the top rated.
And then, we've done a lot of other stuff. We did omelets in bags, or depending on who it was, a hit or miss. We've done pancakes.
Yeah, that omelets in the bag was probably our fanciest meal and or fanciest trip in terms of the meals, right? Because that evening, we had foil packets that were roast on the fire with a variety of ingredients like potatoes and onions and peppers, and I think we did chicken, if I
Mm-hmm.
recall correctly. So again, pre-cooked chicken, so that it
Right.
was already safe to eat regardless of the temperature, essentially on the fire. So that was one of my top meals. Was probably the foil packets meal. And then on that same trip, we did the omelets in a bag and utilized a lot of the same ingredients with the potatoes and peppers and onions, and then added in the eggs, and then basically boiled that in water over the campfire to make omelets.
Yeah, it was awesome. Very delicious. It was nice because I just pre-chopped all the veggies, the mushrooms, the peppers, the onions, all that. We had some cheese that we were able to sprinkle, and people could choose which toppings they wanted with their chicken or in the morning with their eggs. And that worked really well. I also like having the pre-cooked stuff. It's more work, but I mean, maybe I'm not correct, but I feel like it's safer to bring it in a cooler because we just had a cooler with ice to keep all our food and beverages cold. And I liked not having raw meat in the cooler with our food that we ate, just like our water. We'd have a bucket of watermelon. And I wasn't afraid that the raw meat would spill onto the food.
Exactly, yeah. So that does make it a lot easier and does preserve the food safety. Perhaps if we were going to do that in the future, we would have maybe even separate coolers, one for your fresh food and one for your uncooked food and things like that to make sure that that all stays separate. But when you do have a cooler and food, you also have to worry about animals, bears and raccoons and the like getting into your food. So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about that. So there was one night we were in a very rustic area, nowhere near where we live. This was one of the farthest distances we drove. And we had seen a lot of wildlife like deer and such around the campsite. We did not have a lot of people. It was a state camping site, but it was very quiet. We were on the primitive sites, so no running water or electricity. So we could see the RVs, but weren't very many RVs there. We were separate from them. In the middle of the night, I woke Adam up. I was terrified. I thought somebody was at our site getting into our stuff. I was afraid they were going to get into our tent. So I woke him up and made him go outside, and he very bravely went out there to protect us. And tell him what you saw.
yep, it was our friendly neighborhood raccoon eating a opened Hershey's bar that was left over from our s'more making earlier that evening.
He opened the cooler and then opened the package and was eating it, right?
Now, I'm pretty sure the package had already been opened.
Okay.
So, but the cooler was definitely opened. And it wasn't like it was just a lid, right? It actually did have a latch.
Mm-hmm.
So this said raccoon had to unlatch the cooler, open it, and then retrieve the contents therein.
So, yeah, that was, and then we had a mess in the morning that we had to clean up of wrappers that we thought we had properly taken care of our site and leave no trace and keep it clean. And so we had quite a bit of cleanup that we had to follow around these animals that we should have put the cooler in our car, I guess. The car was right next to us. Yeah, we had a latch. I didn't think we needed to put it in the car. We should have.
And that was one of the campsites that did not have a table. And that was actually at that campsite that I had the realization that I really enjoy campsites that have picnic tables.
Yeah, I think you said right. From now on, we will always bring a picnic table if it's a primitive campsite.
Exactly. Yep. That was there was another primitive site, and we made it work because we had a lot of coolers and tubs because that was one of the ones that had a lot of extra gear with us because we knew it was going to be primitive. And then this latter one, not as much. We did not have any surface to put things, so that was where I did come to that conclusion. But it did make sense in terms of some of the previous experiences and frustrations that I had earlier in the year.
So we do have a folding 6-foot table. So you would rather bring that from now on.
Yeah, if we definitely know that there is no picnic table, because a lot of the state parks and other set camping grounds that we stayed at had a fire ring and had a table of some sort, and that would be sufficient. But on these primitive sites, yeah, a table would be nice.
Okay, so we know you'd want to bring a table again. Is there anything else you would do differently? Or what would you ever do this again?
Yeah, definitely would do it again. I don't know if we would embark on this same exact challenge next year, because one of the reasons that we did this challenge was to make it something special that does not happen every year. But certainly did enjoy it and would do some form of camping over the next few years, and doing some of these maybe same sites and things of that nature. And yeah, I can't think of anything else other than I think most people would be surprised we don't use anything for sleeping other than
Oh, yeah.
blankets and
Talk about
pillows,
that.
because that is a lot of extra stuff to haul with
Mm-hmm.
air mattresses or pads or whatever the case may be. But we will just sleep directly on the ground. Essentially, we'll have a tarp and then the tent and then just some blankets and pillows, and make that work for what we need to do. And that is sufficient for us and sufficient for the kids, and makes things a lot easier. We can put all the blankets and pillows in one big bag and haul that where we need to, and makes things a lot easier as well.
Yeah, and especially in the summer where we live, it doesn't get cold in the evenings very much. So we don't need, in a few months when the winter comes, we need our sleeping bags and like blankets and stuff. But here we often didn't even use a blanket because it was too hot. I definitely enjoyed that. And once in a while would remind you that like in 20 years, we can look back and say, remember when we were young enough to sleep on the hard floor without anything? Because we can do that right now. We feel old. So every time we'd feel old, or our bodies would hurt some way, I'd remind us that one day we're going to look back on this summer and say, wow, we slept on the hard floor without anything. We were so young.
Indeed. And maybe that's some encouragement to our listeners to get out there and try camping. Maybe that's something that you don't often do or ever do, but you can start in your backyard and build up from there, and just do what you can do and enjoy the outdoors.
Yeah, do it. And if you hate it, it was one night.
Indeed. So if you found this episode to be nice, perhaps share it with some nice people that you know. And that would be very nice to us, as you include other people listening and sharing this episode and this podcast. So, from your friends at I Hate Talking, until next time, remember, it is only through talking that we begin the journey to understanding.